This is the wall to those who fell in the Warsaw Uprising at the Warsaw Uprising Museum. Today, we meet a remarkable man, 10 when the Second World War broke out, 12 when he joined the underground, 13 when he was tortured by the Gestapo, 15 when he took part in the Warsaw Uprising itself. This is the remarkable story of Professor Julian Kulski. Join me on Poland Daily History as we look at this remarkable man's story and his remarkable life. So, Professor, once you'd been luckily released by the Gestapo and you were back on active, if we may call it active duty for the underground, there was an incident which you relate in the book, of course, where you were determined to wreak some form of revenge on the Germans that took place near the Gdańsk railway station. Could you say a few words about that?
Well, I was so full of hate. And although I was in the commandos, and we had an opportunity to carry out the death sentences on traitors and Volksdeutsch, we needed arms. And I had a friend of mine called David, so he went out and borrowed a couple of pistols. I had a American Colt, and he had a Belgian automatic, and we went hunting for Germans. We went to Bielanik. We went over and spent the whole night, and we couldn't find the opportunity because we wanted to carry out the order of being able to disarm without killing the German. But by the morning, we were pretty tired. We were in Krasinski Square, where the Warsaw Uprising Museum, not museum, but memorial is, yes. And we saw a German soldier, a sergeant, getting on the streetcar, together with about 4 soldiers, all probably coming back from the Russian front, because they were going to the Gdańsk station. So we jumped in the back, and we figured out we could run down the stairs and under the aqueduct, the viaduct, and disarm this soldier. We didn't think about the other 4 Germans who were following him. So we ran down, the German came in and we said, "Hände hoch," and he just looked at us and saw these 2 couple of kids, you know, with guns, and he was a experienced soldier, and he was going to give up his arm, so he started pulling out his gun, and we had to shoot it. And the real reaction to me was, as he dropped in a pool of blood, was that it's possible for me to kill a German, because we were under this superman mentality, and it somehow got into my subconscious that maybe they are really supermen, you can't kill them. But then the 4 soldiers came out, they saw the soldier, the sergeant lying down, took off the rifles and started shooting at us. And we got on the other side of the viaduct and crossed into the old city.
And how did it feel? Was this the first person you had actually killed? When you shot this German, was this the first?
Oh,
German?
that was fun. That didn't bother me at all. Every time I shot a German, it was a pleasure. But what happened was that when we were coming back to Żoliborz, we were warned not to go the same way because the Germans were already capturing civilians, and they executed 25 women and children in that spot. And it's something which I'm carrying it in my conscience to this very day.
Yes, I can
You know, I mean, I was a kid, but I still realized that I was responsible for the death, directly or indirectly. I know the underground army, when they heard about it, I was put before a court-martial for doing it on my own hand, but they also admired my willingness to try to get guns and my courage, so I was just released from activities as a soldier for 2 or 3 weeks. There wasn't much of a penalty.
Not much of anything, no.
It was kind of a slap on the wrist.
And how easy was it for the underground to acquire ammunition and weapons?
It was very difficult, and Ludwig did everything he could, just starting with 1939. There were always the guns which the Polish army buried, rather than when Warsaw surrendered in 1939. So there was one place of digging them up, and the second source was disarming Germans, and the most worthwhile and the most efficient way would be to buy them from Germans. It was surprising, but the German soldiers often were willing to sell the arms, and particularly the Allied soldiers, the Italians, the Hungarians, they really didn't care. No. And the Hungarians were very supportive of us, so they didn't feel guilty about selling. They didn't like the Germans.
No, I can see that they wouldn't. And in terms of when this was an incident you shot the German, but on other occasions, I remember reading the book on an occasion when you captured a lorry load of grenades, and the how you reacted, or what was the sort of reaction with the soldiers you dealt with on that occasion? Because I think one of these characters was actually quite keen that you didn't shoot him.
Oh, the one I took a prisoner.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that was during the uprising, and we were in the fire brigade building in Żoliborz, and evidently the driver and this guy were driving a big lorry full of wooden crates with hand grenades. And they thought they were still German territory. They made a mistake. And we started shooting at them, and they crashed the truck against the wall of the fire brigade. And we came out, and one of these guys hid into his basement. He jumped to the basement of an apartment building, and I pulled him out. And he was sure that I was going to kill him because the Germans killed us on sight. They didn't take prisoners, so it's not surprising they expected the same treatment. But he came out of the hole and started kissing my feet, my shoes, and I felt that was pretty disgusting behavior for a soldier to save your life with this surrendering. And he told me he was Austrian, he was Viennese, he had 8 children, and he wasn't a Nazi. So I kicked him in the back and pushed him ahead with my rifle, and took him to the prisoner of war camp, which we had in Żoliborz.
All right. So yes, that's something one probably doesn't imagine, that the underground would have its own prisoner of war camp with German and Allied prisoners in it.
Well, we didn't take SS and Gestapo. We shot them, generally speaking. But the Luftwaffe, the Wehrmacht, we would take prisoners. Yeah. And they were useful to us. We would make them dig trenches, and Żoliborz was just like a warren full of back and forth, because the only way civilian population, we could move through the streets was through within the trench, deep, because there were quite a few snipers that were left during the uprising, and they would shoot anybody moving, whether it's civilians or a soldier. So moving around Żoliborz during those 2 months was very difficult.